everyone, I'm Linda Nickell, and welcome to the Happiness Hour. Tonight, my guest is Warren Capps. Warren Capps. Warren is one of those photographers who truly doesn't limit himself to a single subject. His work spans portraiture, wildlife, street photography, travel, and that's just nicking the surface of what interests him. But what really stands out is his curiosity and openness to whatever story happens to be in front of his camera. His photographs have been exhibited in local venues and recognized in respected photography competitions, but one of the most meaningful parts of his work happens far from any gallery. Warren is deeply involved with Photo Kids, based in Guatemala, where he teaches and mentors young Mayan students using photography as a way to build confidence, skills, and creative voice. In tonight's presentation, So You Want to Go on a Photo Tour, is based entirely on Warren's real-world experience. He's not only participated in many photo tours, he's also led a few. He'll share what he's learned about choosing the right tour, how to prepare, what to look for, what to avoid, and most importantly, how to set yourself up for a truly successful and rewarding experience. You can connect with him through his website at warrencapps.com. And if you're on Instagram, you'll find him at WCapps. Warren, welcome to the Happiness Hour.
Well, thank you, everybody. Thank you so much. I literally today just got back from a photo workshop that was from Friday through Sunday. So I'm happy to be back. I'm happy to be here to talk about workshops and tours and fill you in. And believe me, if there's a mistake to be made in booking one, I've probably done it. And hopefully you'll learn from my experience. I guess we're ready to get started, right?
Yes, sir. The screen is yours.
Okay, so let me bring it up and see if I can get this up and sharing. So the goal here is to ensure how you get your value from a photography tour or workshop. I've got it divided into three parts. The parts are before that first deposit, because I want you to make a good buying decision. And then what your planning is in getting ready for a photo tour or workshop. And then the third part, away we go, is okay, you're there. What do you do to make sure you get the most value once you're on site and on the tour? So that's our objective here in there. So who am I? I shot my first photographs when I was about age 18, and that's my very first photo I ever took in there. It became a serious hobby in 1995 when my wife said, you need to pick up a hobby, honey, and do something to get out of the house. And so I went to a Santa Fe photo workshop in there. I have attended or run about 40 tours and numerous workshops. I've been to 7 continents, all 7 of them, 43 countries, and 53 states and territories. And right now we're working on the Canadian provinces. That's our next goal. We got about 8 down and 5 to go. But first, I wanted to make a definitional thing here so that people understood the difference between a photo tour and a photo workshop. They have some commonalities. The commonalities are that they're multi-day. They're a trip that's planned and executed by a tour company. In most cases, the itinerary is planned. The lodging may or may not be included. Transportation may or may not be included. Meals may or may not be included, but there's all commonalities. But both of them may have some photography setups involved, arranged for you in there. But a photo tour, you're expected to know how to use your camera, and will probably have minimal mentoring and training, and that's a big deal because if you're not real familiar with your camera, that could be a bit of a problem in there. The focus is really on getting you photo opportunities in the field. That's really what they're trying to do on a tour. Here's an example. Whoops, it didn't come down. Let's see, come on. There we go. Here's an example. This is Chef Chowan in Morocco. In there, this is an example of a photo tour. I just thought it was a fun blue picture of cats, so I threw it in here just for fun. A photo workshop, the difference is that it will be have more extensive mentoring and training in the field. And so people will be looking, talking with you, double checking with you, making sure that you're getting good images. Generally speaking, they will have some image reviews on a regular schedule every 2 or 3 days. Hopefully, you get an image review. It may have some classroom time. It may include some setups because it's a workshop. It's less likely to include lodging, and you can make your own arrangements for that. This is literally from the workshop that I was on last weekend. This was a cowboy workshop in Arizona, and so I wanted to throw something in from my most recent workshop. And again, this obviously is a setup. We got all the cowboys together driving at us. The setup was so good that there's only a particular time of year when the sun is setting right on the road that they were on to create that dust. And so that's why we did it exactly this time of year when we did it. Okay, so let's talk about before the first deposit. And one of the things I'm going to do through here is I'm going to intersperse my talk with just photos of where I've been and what I've done. Because if you look at text slides the whole time, you're going to get kind of bored. I don't want you to be bored. So the first three questions are the big ones. Where do you want to go? When do you want to go? And because seasonality is kind of important. And why do you want to go? I mean, why is it that draws you to that particular tour that you want, or do you just want to get out of town in there? Before you start thinking about, those three, you should be thinking also about what are your expectations for yourself? What's your goal for yourself? I mean, seriously, I was on a photo tour where the expectation of the one fellow in the tour was he had a little toy man and he wanted to take a picture of that toy man in every place we went for his grandson. That was what he wanted to get out of the tour. Like, okay, fine. Wasn't my tour. You also have to understand your physical ability and your camera skill level. There's nothing worse than having somebody that has mobility problems on your tour or for the rest of the tour as well for yourself in there. And you're going to be challenged to get the photos. You're going to have to understand your camera well. So we'll continue on to that. So first question is kind of what's the cost of it in there? Well, there's a lot of things that go into the cost of a tour. So obviously the biggest one is the tour fee itself. Yeah, it's about somewhere to be probably expect $1,000 a day. Working out a cost per day when you see the big number, look at how many days it is and see, okay, what, are they, 800 a day, 1,000 a day. It also depends on whether or not lodging and tour transportation is included in that. These days, most international tours are going to require that you have travel insurance. If you're going to go more than once a year, I would suggest you buy an annual policy. Otherwise, you have to buy a policy for the one tour that you're going on. But many of them are going to ask you to present proof that you did that because they're protecting themselves with that. You may need visas. The tips is an interesting one. I was this past summer, I went to Namibia, and I'll talk a little bit more about it. And as I was thinking ahead through it, my wife said, well, it doesn't have to be a photo tour. Would you look at all the other tours that are available? And I did so. And you'll see in a second, I had a spreadsheet about it. But one of the things I discovered, I had a friend of mine that was on a Namibia tour as we were going through our decision process. And so I Facebook Messenger said, how's it going? And she said, well, there's two problems with it. And I said, what's that? And she said, well, one, it's a National Geographic expedition, which means sometimes I have to sit in the middle seat in the safari vehicle. As a photographer, that's not so cool. And I said, yeah, I can understand that. She said, the other one, she says, I am getting tipped to death. She said, I'm putting out $80 a day, pretty much $1,000 for the whole trip on tips that I didn't really expect to do. So that's you got to kind of know what's the tip policy. What's the meal policy? A lot of times, this last workshop I was on, they gave us breakfast and lunch. We were on our own for dinners. If you're traveling a lot, all three of them will be included, but understand what it is. Clearly, you've got flights involved, and you got to pay for those. And in this day and age, I would always recommend you get to wherever you want to be a day early, so you're going to have an extra hotel night that you may have to pay for that's not part of the tour in there. So here was just a sample spreadsheet I did for Namibia. You can kind of sort of see what I looked at. A couple of key elements in it was, of course, how much was it? And you can see the second most expensive one was Minch Tours, and the most expensive one was Natural Habitat, I should say Habitat Adventures, in there. But so I did a cost per day on them. I looked at the group size. That's also important. Which is how big is the group? National Geographic at 16 would have turned me off. I like groups in the sizes of 6 to 8 in there. A Akari with only 4 would have been kind of nice in there. And then I took a look at where did they all go? I wanted to check and see where they went and what they covered. To say, is that the places I wanted to go, and what was the commonality there? Some of the indirect costs you have, and then we're going to get to some slides. What's the ratio of tour leaders to clients? Tom Hausler, who's here right now, he and I were on a tour in Scotland. By the end of the tour, it was 2 to 1. There were 2 of us and 1 tour leader. That was pretty good in there. So that's an important thing to understand is how many tour leaders you have. Generally, it's good to have 2. 1 is not unusual if it's fairly small. Other indirect costs, what kind of support do you get before or after the tour? Are they helping you book rooms before you get there, the extra nights? Are they taking care of that for you? If you're getting in early, what are you doing about transportation? Are they helping out with that sort of thing? And they're after the tour. Is there any additional support? So I have been on one tour where I was on a WhatsApp group for a considerable amount of time before the tour with everybody on the tour, so we could all ask questions and see each other's questions. And then after the tour, we each got a 1-hour consult with one of the 2 tour leaders, privately, which was really very nice and very helpful in that. Third point, the depth of knowledge of the tour leader. How many times have they led this tour? I've been on tours where it was the first time the tour leader was in the country. They were using, of course, a local guide, but what that meant was that the tour leader didn't quite understand the timing of things that was going on, and days went a real long, and sometimes we got in real late and we were very tired. Other times I've got people that have been there many, many times, and you have a great experience with it. Last point is, if you're going to do this multiple times, there is some value in developing a relationship with one particular company. If they offer what you like, try to stick with them because they're going to get to know you and what you want. I mean, they've all got client management systems that are going to keep track of you and what you've got to say in there. So first set of slides, Namibia. We went to Namibia this summer. If you don't know where it is, go to South Africa and go up to the left. It's on the Atlantic coast, just on the north side of South Africa. It used to be part of South Africa. And one of the biggest claim to fame is these big red dunes in there. And then there's a ghost town that's been taken over by the sand, Holmanskop. It's kind of an interesting place. We went to the Etosha National Park, and my zebra photo is my favorite photo from there that I got. Some of the value of having tour leaders that know where they're doing. That lion that we saw, he was the only lion we saw in the park. We saw him hiding behind some bushes. He got up and started walking through the field. Our tour leader, one of the safari tour leaders said, I know exactly what he's doing. He's heading to a water hole 2 kilometers away from us. We're going to drive over to that water hole and wait for him. And by gum, he showed right up, right on schedule, and we were the only safari vehicle there when he got there. So we were in the ideal position to photograph this. Hopefully you can see. Couple other things, payment and refund policies. This is pay attention to what the payment schedule is. A red flag is if they don't seem real concerned about money, collecting money, and if the deposit is really kind of small. I mean, you should have some skin in the game. They should want you to have some skin in the game in there. Their refund policy. This became real important when the pandemic came along because I had discovered I had signed up for a Galapagos expedition for 2021, and obviously it didn't go. And I called them up and said, "Well, what's the deal?" And they said it's a non-refundable trip. And I've been on other trips with them that were refundable, so it could be trip specific. And I'm like, oh, that's not good. I managed to do it the next year. We were able to go the next year. You need to understand that if they don't get enough bookings, they may cancel on you in there. So it's important to pay close attention. And if you're nervous about buying tickets and stuff like that, they're getting ready to buy plane tickets. Give them a call, send them an email, and ask them, is this a go? Because they're not going to really tell you, particularly if they're managing a lot of trips. Consider how you want to pay for it. Use a credit card that if you need to dispute the payment or a refund or something like that, if at all possible, use a credit card. Some of them will give you discounts if you do direct bank transfers, 3%, something like that. That's attractive. But if the credit card protects you a little bit, you may want that protection. And you also need to be aware of what are the penalties if you need to cancel. Any number of reasons cause us to cancel, but you've got to understand they have planned and marketed for a certain number of people to be on that trip. They've budgeted for that. If you cancel, that throws their budget all out of whack, particularly if it's close in. And so there are going to be some penalties if you don't do that in there. So that's all sort of important things to go. Here's just two sample cancellation policies. One of them is a Mongolian land tour that I'm taking this summer in there, and notice that it doesn't get painful till 45 days. It starts getting real painful about 45 days or 90 days in there. So that's kind of the area where it starts to get a little bit painful in there. So, but at least they'll refund some of your money if you have to cancel. Here was my Galapagos Islands one where it says your non-refundable deposit will hold your space. Further non-refundable payment is due by. And I'm like, oh, I didn't pay attention to that stuff. And unfortunately, we were able to still go on the tour in there. So one of the tours I took this past fall was Vietnam. And just a couple of things in Vietnam, just a couple of slides here. This one I'm really proud of. And it goes to one of my mantras whenever you're on a photo tour or a workshop, always take smartphone photos. This was my iPhone. And I didn't even realize it. You're going through the Lightroom, checking on and go, oh, wow, an iPhone photo. That's pretty darn good. I was very pleased with that. Another shot of Vietnam. We were in northern Vietnam, north of Hanoi, going around where the rice terraces were in the fall, right before rice harvest. This was a bit of a setup. This was a fisherman that was hired to be a model, showing us sort of the traditional ways of fishing, and they're kind of cool, going at sunrise. Okay, pre-tour communications. How is the tour company going to communicate with you? Is it phone, email, text, WhatsApp, Zoom? I find the best ones are WhatsApp and maybe a Zoom call before you go is really very helpful in there. Are they going to provide you with packing checklists or camera gear recommendations? Because a lot of people, if you're inexperienced with this sort of thing, that's extremely helpful to know that sort of stuff. And how much are they communicating with you before the tour? In there, are they touching base with you pretty regularly? Do they just take your money and just ignore you until the day before the tour starts? That's all kind of important. And do they do some sort of group coordination with WhatsApp and Zoom meetings are real great. Email chains, probably a little bit less so these days. I just threw this in here. This is an example from our email chain that we were going on when we were in Vietnam. I don't expect you to read it all, but you can kind of see some questions about visas, questions about clothing packing lists, questions about laundry services, questions about the location of the hotel, things like that in there. Another point is there some dedicated backroom support, or is it a one-person operation? If things don't go right, that backroom support is really important. When I went to Namibia, we had one person that actually never made the tour. She was having so much trouble getting out to the Newark airport, and she was booked for Namibia and then a follow-on tour in Zambia. And she finally said, "Look, if I show up at all at this point, my travel insurance won't pay for all the parts I missed. But if I skip it completely because of travel problems, they'll reimburse me. So I'm just going to skip Namibia in there." But in the middle of doing all that, there was a whole lot of how do we get her? How do we get her to catch up with us? Because we were in a van traveling around Namibia in there. Another example I had was Iceland. Tom Hausler was with us on this, where we were flying from Newark into Keflavik Airport, and all of a sudden the plane took off and said, "We're going to Glasgow, Scotland." Why? Because they'd gotten 20 inches of snow on the runway since we had taken off, and they hadn't had time to clear it, and we didn't have enough gas to hang around in there. So, and the result was we had planned one extra day. We got there just literally an hour before the tour actually started in there. How responsive is the company? I mean, if you ask them questions and want to know things, are they quickly responsive or not? If it's a one-person company, one-person operation, they may be on another tour. They can't answer questions for you until they get back from that tour. And what resources are available before and after? Some people will give you reading lists. They'll give you, some maybe some YouTube videos to watch, some things about where you're going to go. And same thing afterwards. Do they have any resources for you afterwards? So another place I went, this was a year before, was in Brazil. This is a caiman. This is one of the animals that's food for a jaguar, though I wouldn't try to do it. And of course, capybaras are beautiful animals. He was also food for a jaguar. Those are our two primary sources of food in there. And of course, this is the jaguar. And there, you got to wonder, how do you get a picture like that on a photo tour? Well, a long lens and a boat and a boat guide that knows how to get up there and knows how to get you into the position for the shot in there. So all of that is just enormously useful to doing something like that. Here is just an iPhone shot coming back in the boat when we were on the river, just to kind of show you that keep that phone up, because you never know when you're going to get a beautiful sunset. And I don't know about the other smartphones, but iPhones does a brilliant rendition on sunsets and sunrises. So we still haven't picked the tour yet. What some key considerations? Is it a general tour, or is it a specialized focus? Linda mentioned in introducing me that I'm a generalist. I like to take pictures of everything. A tour for me that is all of one thing, all landscapes, all birds, would drive me a little crazy. I need variety in there. So you have to determine for yourself what is it. Second point is, how unique is the itinerary? If I can go to that place and I can figure out my own itinerary to do the trip, then the tour may not be all that useful for me. I want a tour that's going to get me to places and or events that I otherwise would not have access to in there. An interesting example of that, both Iceland and Cuba, if you sign up for either one of those tours, particularly Iceland in the wintertime, you're going to go to the same places as everybody else goes. There's just that not many places to go. And in Iceland in the winter, there's sort of a ring road around. Everybody drives the ring road. Everybody goes to the same waterfalls. Cuba, the itinerary is controlled by the government. It's hard to find a tour that is actually fairly unique. I mentioned about the uniqueness of them. And then finally, the variety of subjects that you're going to get. Also, the length of the day. I mean, if you're into sunrises and sunsets, June is not a good month. You're going to be up real early and out real late. When we were in Iceland in February, early March, I think it was, it was pretty nice because the days were fairly short and we could catch a sunrise and sunset without having to disrupt our sleep patterns, as it were, in there. Who designed the tour? That's a kind of an interesting question. I've been on tours where it became fairly obvious that the person guiding the tour didn't actually design it, and somebody else in the tour company designed it. So there were things that didn't go, didn't quite go as well as they might have if the guide had actually had some skin in the game designing the tour themselves. Do any of the tour leaders speak the local language? This doesn't seem like, well, somebody should, but I went on a tour of Japan and it was being led by a Brit, and his number two was from Indonesia. No, from the Philippines. I'm sorry, from the Philippines. Neither one of them spoke a lick of Japanese. Now, it turns out that the second guy was actually very experienced in Japan, even though he didn't speak the language. And today, with all the Google Translate sorts of things you have on your phones, that actually alleviated some of the problems because we could at least read a menu using our phones and things like that. Again, the tour leader's experience with that specific tour and tours in general. And honestly, I'm throwing out all these questions. Don't be afraid to call up the tour company and talk to them and ask these questions. This is what you want to know before you make your decision. Now, a final point here is what was I going to say? Oh, the frequency of changing lodging. If you change lodging every day, that gets very tiring. You should have a tour, and obviously, if it's a tour, you're traveling. I get that, but hopefully, periodic you'll stay 2 or 3 days at some place, followed by maybe a couple of one night stands in there, so you can at least get out. Because if for no other reason, if you're there at a place for 2 or 3 days, maybe you can get laundry done. If you're changing every night in there. Okay, let's see what else we got. Tour structure, total number of tour participants. What's the leader to participant ratio? Is it a dedicated photo tour or is it a general tour with photo opportunities? And I'm not denigrating National Geographic specifically, but that would fall into that second category. They're a general tour with photo opportunities, which means they're not going to pay much attention to the photographers. My first trip to Africa on a safari, that's the kind of tour I was on, and I didn't get some chances to do some things. Wildlife. If you're on a tour that's wildlife, are they setups or are they truly wild encounters? Costa Rica tours, in many cases, where you're going to photograph the frogs and the bugs and stuff like that, and the snakes. A lot of times those are setups. They bring the frog out of the refrigerator, put them on a leaf, and then you photograph them. They put them back in the refrigerator in there. So I'm not real big on those sorts of things. Hummingbird workshops are much the same way, where they've got a lot of flashes all set up and around, and they've been feeding them for a while. In there, image reviews during the trip. Will you get individual image reviews, or are they group sessions? A lot of times you'll see, give us your best 3 from the last 2 days. Or I've been on tours where they say, I got an hour, let's take a look at your photos, what you've been getting, just individually. That's kind of helpful in there. So this ocelot is a good example. This was in Brazil. This is a good example of a setup. That's a nice photo. They feed this ocelot every night. There's food for them. There's lights set up. There's even bleachers to come in and watch the ocelot come in. So it's a great picture, but it's really a setup in there. Fortunately, we didn't have many of those. Here's just some photos from Japan in there. I did greatly enjoy going to Japan, and I found that, people were willing to pose for me if I asked, even though, you can point at a camera, point at you, point at them. They figured it out in there. We were fortunate that we caught Mount Fuji, which is a lot of times you don't catch. This is in April in there, and we were amazingly fortunate that cherry blossoms were still around, because I didn't really expect that at all. This is a torii gate in one of the lakes there, and I was playing around trying to get the blurring of the grasses, but get the gate framed kind of between them. Some more questions for the tour company. You can see there's a lot. Most of this presentation is about, before you pay your money, because there's a lot that goes into it. So make sure you're happy. So how much free time is built into the schedule is a good question. I went on a tour of Morocco, and the fellow running the tour, it was his first time in Morocco. Second, which meant he didn't know how the schedules went. Third, he was single. He was a marathoner, and so he wanted to make sure we got every possible photo we could. So he started at 6 a.m. with a photo walk before breakfast. then breakfast, and then we went all day long. And because he didn't know the timing of things, a lot of times we didn't pull into our hotel for the night until like 8 o'clock at night, and then we had to have dinner. And we were exhausted, absolutely just exhausted because there was no free time. This workshop I just finished up this past weekend. Our lunch sessions were about 2 hours long. I mean, you could eat lunch in 30 minutes, and the hour and a half there was just to kind of rest up. And again, part of it is that for the most cases, the people that take tours and can afford these things, we're old. We're in our 60s and our 70s or our 80s, and we need a little bit of rest time, if we want to keep going day after day. Do you get some personal choices in the itinerary? Can you say, I would like to skip this one, this particular thing, and go on and do something else? And of course, that's gonna depend on the travel that's going on around with the tour. But if you say, geez, I'm tired, I really need to rest. Can I just skip this afternoon? Are you going to be able to do something like that? And I've done that. There's been times when I've had to do that because I'll tell you, if you're tired, you're not taking good photos. So you might as well get rested so you can get good photos the next day. How much driving time is expected? It's inevitable, particularly in a photo tour as opposed to a photo workshop. You may do a lot of driving time. When I was in Vietnam, there were probably 2 days where we did nothing but drive most of the day. A good tour company will attempt to get you some kind of photo experience on the way, so during taking a break at some place where you can get it. But you should kind of understand that there may be a fair amount of driving just to get around. And maybe it was a bit the same way. There was quite a bit of driving involved in with that. Um, do you want to bring a spouse or a significant other? Do they allow it? Some won't allow it, and if they do, can they keep busy? That's real important because happy spouse, happy shooter in there, and do they? Some of them will have some alternative activities for them. Some of them may reduce the fee because they're not a photographer and they don't require the same attention that the photographer does in there. But that's real important to understand. I got approached to sign up for a tour that was in Scotland on the Isle of Wight, I think it was, in March, and we were going to stay at a lodge the whole time and to go out and shoot landscapes. And I went and talked to my wife Lynn, and I said, "You're interested in going?" She said, "Well, we're an hour away from any time. You guys are going to be out in the cold and the wet and the wind, and I'm just going to be hanging around a lodge. No, thank you. I don't think I'm interested in something like that." Few more questions. I'm not a big sunrise sunset guy. They happen. Each one of those happens once a day. I get it that there's people that love them and that's what they want to do. But if you're not, those early mornings and those late afternoons are going to wear on you. And so sometimes I skip the sunrise. I usually can make it to the sunset, but I've got friends that have been on tours that they're getting up at 3 a.m. to take a 1 hour and a half walk to be in the ideal position at 4:30 or 5 o'clock to catch the sunrise. They get beautiful photos. Don't get me wrong. It's a big sacrifice to do that. Personally, I'm just not that willing, but you want to know what are you getting yourself into. Same thing with the length of day and the time of year. If you go to Iceland in the wintertime, the days are very short. That's very different than going to Iceland in the summertime, where the days are very long in there. Weather. Start checking ahead of time to what the weather is like, where you're going to be. Is it dry season, wet season? What's going on there? So you have to kind of fall into that. Dietary limitations. You're going to be asked about it, particularly if they're buying a lot of the meals. Are you vegan? Are you vegetarian? Do you have lactose intolerance? Things like that. When I was in Namibia, there was one place we stayed at. The only meat we were offered was game meat, the kudu, if you want to know for sure. But in there, and so if you were kind of a little askance at eating game meat and not wanting to do that, then maybe I'm not sure what you do in that case. Couple of transportation questions. We're getting close to the end of this part. This is the longest part. Seating arrangements. They are it's critical in safari vehicles that you get a row to yourself in there. Do you, and so how many safari vehicles are there for how many people? When I was in Namibia, we had 7 people, 2 safari vehicles, four in each vehicle, and we had room to basically have a road or same thing. We were in the Pantanal. We each had our own row in the boats. Is there a driver in addition to the leaders? And is that driver subject to union or government regulations? I say this because I went on a tour in Newfoundland where the driver was a retired driver. He was subject to union rules. We had to call him Slow Joe. And what kept happening was that he had to have a certain amount of rest time. If we came in late, if we came in late, then he started late. And if we came in later that day, then we started later that day. So by the time we got to the end of the tour, we weren't leaving until noon. And I wasn't really happy about that in there. Are there gonna is the van gonna be packed full or is it gonna have empty seats for your gear? Particularly if you're in a van, it gets a little tight because they want to get the smallest van they can to get people around. So here was my Newfoundland example. This is what Slow Joe was driving. They were also had a big shortage of smaller tour vehicles, and so we had a full 41 passenger van for 11 people. We all had like 2 rows or 2 or 3 rows to ourselves in there. So much for you. Now made your decision. What's your planning? What is it that you want to do that is gonna that's gonna make it better? Like I said earlier, arrive a day early. Pay for the extra night at the hotel. I have seen it so many times where it's happened to me, it's happened to and my wife, it's happened to other people on the tour where they don't get there a day early. They arrive, they're stressed, they get there late because something went wrong with their. This gives you a little bit of fudge factor. In some cases, I would say maybe go 2 days early. I'm going to Mongolia this summer. I'm probably going to plan to be there 2 days early if I can get the time zone change or the international date line right. I didn't do it right when I went to Vietnam. This seems like a duh. Carry your camera gear on the plane, but I've seen people that don't do it, and they've had problems. They've had their gear stolen, or their gear got lost. Their luggage got lost, and so they didn't get it until another day or two late. Um, and when you're traveling, make sure you switch your camera to the local time. Do it before you leave home in there. That's, once you're, think about doing things like that and plan on taking photos of the journey itself. You'll find you really enjoy some of those photos. Planning for your clothing. I would say a couple of things. Unless you're traveling privately in a tour group, leave the photo vest behind, especially in cities. It marks you just, there's the tourist photographer in there. So try to not do that. Shorts are generally, choose clothing that is fits the local culture. Avoid bright colors, logos, political or offensive comments. I mean, it's so easy to get marked as an American, and that may or may not be a good thing these days in there, but certainly you don't want to be walking around making political statements. I would strongly recommend that you use neutral tones, especially if you're on a safari in there. I clearly dress for the weather, the terrain, and for insects. You might need, definitely maybe need some insect repellents and insect repellent shirts and socks you can get, and dress modestly. Shorts are frowned upon for men and women in many countries. Bare shoulders, midriff showing, cleavage is not a good idea for men. Spaghetti tops aren't really good. Beater shirts aren't good. So all those things, form-fitting yoga pants, in many places that would be kind of considered offensive. So, dress nice. What you don't want to do is, let's see, turn. There we go. Don't be these 2 people that you see over here. The guy in the red and the guy with the yellow, with the orange backpack. They just stick out. I was in Japan. I was in Kyoto. They just stick out like a sore thumb. Now, I couldn't do anything about them. They weren't on my tour. But over in the photograph on the right, this was in Vietnam. This fella was on our tour, and he was wearing this bright orange shirt, and we saw it multiples of times. And it was kind of like, James, can't you just wear, something else? that doesn't stick out quite so much. I get it. I could go into Photoshop and I could change the color of the shirt. But why do I want to take that extra step? On the other hand, the guy on the left over here, kind of, yeah, he's got a backpack. He's obviously a tourist. He's got a camera, but he kind of blends into the picture. You don't really notice him. And again, I get it. With today's object removal and subject removal, you could probably take them out perhaps, but don't make it extra work for everybody if you can help them. Planning on health and welfare, BYOP, bring your own pharmacy. If you need, I would strongly recommend a little Seek Pro, Imodium, aspirin, anything you think you might need. You may or may not have access to pharmacies depending on the tour and where you're going. So I've got a little pharmacy packets that I've put together on our own so we can do that. Safety, using a money belt. Leave your valuables at home. My wife Lynn doesn't wear her wedding ring. Instead, she's got a silicone one she wears. If they want to steal that one, more power to her. She's got 6 more at home in there. Leave the valuables at home. Again, don't bring a lot of jewelry and things like that. Minimal credit cards. Go through your credit cards. You don't need them all. Use RF protected wallets and purses. Use splash-proof bags if you're carrying just in a bag. And if you're in crowds or in a city, use the buddy system. Don't go out on your own. Make sure you go with somebody else because you'll get free time on some of these tours and say, "Oh, just go off and do what you want," and you're going to want to do that. Depending on your mobility, you may or may not want a walking stick. Camera gear checklist. Take 2 camera bodies. I made that mistake the first time I went to Alaska, and when I went up to the first glacier, my camera went clunk instead of click, and I had to borrow a camera from somebody else for the whole rest of the trip. Lenses appropriate for the tour subjects. They should go over a lot of this stuff beforehand. In there, I've got a really long birding lens. I didn't bring it, I don't bring it to city tours. What am I going to use it for? You may or may not need a tripod. They'll tell you generally if one is useful. I shoot OM system gear, so I rarely need a tripod for anything, but I still bring it along. I used it this past weekend at the workshop I was in. Generally speaking, a monopod is not necessary. If you're doing a landscape tour, the circular or linear polarizer ND filters are very useful to have. Otherwise, you probably don't do them. I have carried my filters way too many times for the amount of use I actually get out of them. I rarely use them, but I seem to always carry them. I probably should skip doing that. And of course, memory cards, bring a power strip, bring a laptop if you can, bring an external hard drive so you can download and back up your stuff as you're going. Those are all sorts of pieces of gear you want. A little bit more. Put the manuals for your camera on your smartphone. That way, if you're stuck in the field not figuring out how to do something, I don't know how to use Pro Capture. Go and look it up on the manual on your phone because you may not have internet access to get to it. Study your camera features. I had one photo mentor that said, when you get a new camera, just dedicate reading 1 page of the manual every day in there. Especially if it's a new camera in there, study those features. I still got a little bit. I'm running a little long. I'm sorry. Am I okay, Linda?
You're fine.
Okay, just checking. You may need remote trigger. Oh, practice with your camera as well. Remote triggers might be helpful. Headlamps, knee pads. Probably I still do it, and you'll do it, and you will do it until you figure out not to do it. You'll overpack. Try to slim down, not bring everything that you got with you, that you got available to you. So here's a few more fun photos. Miscellaneous states. This was up in Maine. This was in New Mexico. The one on the left, I didn't understand the significance of it till a couple of years later, but there's handprints on that thing, and it was in Taos Pueblo, and the handprints represent missing and murdered indigenous women. And oh, that's significant. This is Shiprock. I was able to get a beautiful shot of Shiprock and with the light on and the black and white. This is probably one of my favorite photos from the Bosque del Apache in New Mexico. I just got back from the Bosque del Apache as well, and discovered I had submitted this to one of their contests and I discovered it was in their annual publication they put out for the tourists to pick up. Like, oh, look at that. That photo looks like mine. Oh, wait, it is mine. I saw my byline on it. They gave me photo credit for it. So that was kind of cool. This was in Yellowstone National Park in the winter, a year ago, pretty much a year ago. Okay, we're getting close. Goals and expectations. A lot of times you're going to be asked at the beginning, what are your goals? Is it learning? Is it fun? Is it a portfolio? Is it a project? Um, Again, assess your activity level and your health. What's your stamina? What's your mobility? And this is an odd one, but do you use a CPAP machine? That can be problematic or not, but you got to plan for it if you really need to do one. Is the tour all photography all the time? When we were in Morocco on this one tour, we had, like I say, we had gone dawn to dusk every day and longer. And finally we got to Fez, and we had a full day of photography planned, and everybody on the tour said, "No, we're going shopping," because we had not a single opportunity to do any shopping at all in there. Plan cash needs. Usually there'll be ATM access. Certainly at the beginning when you meet up. Getting local currency, you'll get advice on whether you should get it at the airport, you should get it at an ATM, whether you should get it from your bank before you go. It kind of all depends on the country and the exchange rates and that sort of thing in there. Communicate what you want to do with your tour leaders, even if they don't ask you. Let them know that this is what I want to try and do on this particular trip. I want to get a photo of some particular bird if it's a birding trip, or I want to get some portraits, some street photography portraits. You might want to consider, as you get good at this, you might want to consider and do a lot of trips. You might want to consider going to a place more than once. There's some real advantage to that in there. And I got a quote from Hercules that says, "No man steps into the same river twice." So even if you go back, it will not be the same place as you were there before. And here's one of my examples of this. I go to Guatemala a lot, and I turned out, I kind of looked one day and said, well, I got a bunch of photos of this fella. And so this is him across 12 years. He sold these carved angels in the square in Antigua. He's since passed away. But I thought that was kind of interesting to get that across time view of him. Flexibility and attitude. Expect changes to the itinerary based on weather or logistics. And to do that, keep your personal mindset adaptable and positive in there. I've been guilty of not doing that sometimes and getting and like, well, I thought we were going to do X. I really wanted to do that, and then it fell apart, and we weren't able to do that. Be open to learning from the peers that you're with you on the tour. I mean, these are not stupid people that are taking the tour with you. A lot of them have a lot of knowledge themselves, and it may be particular to your own camera knowledge. Sylvia, are you there? Sylvia and I worked together on this workshop this past weekend, and we were working together with our OM system cameras, and that was a big help to both of us in there. And then the fourth bullet is, I think, rather important. Focus on the results, not the process. I've been on tours where I really wasn't that happy with how the tour was going, and I kind of grumbled a little bit to my wife about it, and that, and we're not doing it. But then I got home and I looked at the photos I got, and I went, oh, those are some pretty good photos. I'm pretty happy with what I got, in there. And then and I have to give credit to my friend Emily Wilson, because she always says this, sometimes the detour is the tour. Sometimes you can't go someplace, can't do something. They'll come up with a detour, and sometimes that's better than the original plan. So be ready for that. Okay, so now we're getting close to getting to the tour starting. There's dietary limitations of fixed menus. A lot of places you go, they're going to have fixed menus. Can you find something you want to eat? If it is a fixed menu, does the group always eat together, or can you go off alone or in a smaller group? I mean, if you're on a 12-day trip with the same 6 people, you're going to get a little tired of each other at some point. So sometimes it's nice to just go off with one other person, or if your spouse is with you or your significant other, just go off together on a nice little private meal in there. Be ready for irregular meals. I'm a noon lunchtime guy. My wife can tell she can set a clock by when I'm ready for lunch in there. And I had to learn how to like, oh, we're not going to eat till 2 or 2:30. And so I learned to bring snacks and power bars along and make sure you keep yourself hydrated. The goofy thing is, I never know whether they're going to give me a water bottle or I should bring one of my own or I should buy one when I get there. It seems like I bring one and then they give me one, or I don't bring one and they don't give me one. I never seem to get it right in there. So finally, we're down to the last section. Away we go. So here's just a couple of things. Keep your equipment light and mobile. You're going to be moving around a lot. Don't get your. I've seen people, with these enormous backpacks that say, "Well, I can't walk out of the vehicle without everything." Yes, you can. And buy the lenses that'll let you do that are light and mobile. Uh, Take the behind the scenes photos and photos of the participants. When you get home, you'll really enjoy those. Photograph signs and surroundings, and we'll take a look at that here in just a second. We'll use all your senses as looking for opportunities, and I'm going to show you some slides on that as well, particularly sound and smell. Take photos with your phone for GPS tagging. If you've got a camera that's got GPS logging in it, great. A lot of times we don't, and so I make it's a ritual to me that wherever we stop to take photos, I take a photo with my iPhone because I can always tag where I was and transfer that into the other photos if I want to know where I was. Sometimes it's fun to develop a theme. I was in Italy and I started photographing the post boxes in the little public water fountains. That was kind of fun. In the U.S., I have a whole thing about flags across America. If I see a homemade flag, I've been doing it for 20 some years. It's a theme of mine, but I look for flags that are handmade. And then finally, engage actively to maximize your learning. Try new things. So here's some examples of some of this stuff. Okay, photos on the way. And so here's my wife, Lynn, and Tom Hausler and his wife in there. And here's me getting ready to go on a plane that lands on the beach. There's my wife, Lynn. I think we were getting in Morocco. Maybe we were getting on or off the plane in Morocco. This was in the Yukon with a helicopter ride to go into backcountry. The only way to get to the backcountry was a helicopter ride. That's all kind of fun. Signs and maps. I take just some fun signs I got. I also a lot of times will take my phone and do a screenshot when I have the map app up to show me where I was too. So not only do I use the GPS, but sometimes I use the map app and get the screenshots of it so I can remember where was I when I took these photos in there. A couple more fun signs. Cowboy parking only, violators will be castrated. The Bosque del Apache, that's just a good information sign. If you're ever going to do a presentation on where you're going, it's nice to have a sign of the place you're at. And then this was out of Belize, the world needs more kindness. That was just a good sign to go. Here's some Hawaiian time hours in there. And then on the right, this was in Nebraska. I found this rest area, and I just thought that was just too funny in there. So I had to get a picture of that. Sounds and smells. I smelled the baker, and I went over to the bakery and, can I take a picture of you? And like, yeah. So I got a picture of him pulling things out with the oven light on and everything. The fellow on the left is in Guatemala. They're in the middle of one of their big Lenten processions. And that whistle he plays, the melody he plays in that, gets in your brain and never leaves it. It's like a brain worm. It's just haunting how it goes. Here's one of my themes. Some of the homemade flags that I found around the place. The owl bar was right where I was in the Bosque del Apache a week ago. Well, there's one I found just tacked to the side of I think it was in Oregon. My cat just joined me, so pardon me. In there. Here were some of the themes of the Italian water fountains that I did. That was kind of fun. And there, the tour leader execution. You're on the tour. Are there this is kind of important. If you're a new camera user or a new photographer, you need to push that they do a review session with what you're doing. Because if you're setting on P and not doing anything interesting or imaginative, or you're just doing something plain wrong and you're getting off focus and don't understand how the focus works in your camera, you need to find out real early. So if you're new, this is like one of the most important things to do when you get started. Um, Again, mentioned this a couple of times. You get image critiques and reviews during the tour. Yeah, are there drastic changes to the itinerary? Some minor changes that are understandable is good, but you paid for a particular itinerary. You ought to be sticking pretty close to it. Generally, that won't be a big problem. And again, meal choices, times, and options. We kind of talked about that a bit already. The tour leader execution. How are they communicating with you, and how well are they communicating with you in there? Are they using WhatsApp? When I was in Vietnam, this was so good. This is the first time we did this. In order to speed up our lunches, they WhatsApped us the menu for the restaurant we were going to eat at lunchtime. We sent them what we wanted, and they sent it on. They collated it and sent it on to the restaurant. We hit the restaurant, and our lunch was ready. That was using WhatsApp. WhatsApp was fantastic for this. WhatsApp is also very good for tour leader location. You can share location, and you may not care where each other is, but you do care where the tour leader is, particularly if you got separated. That happened in Venice with me, and it was really nice to be able to tell one of the other participants and say, "Well, where's the tour leader? Where's the tour leader?" And I looked at my phone and I said, "Oh, she's over at the restaurant right outside in the plaza, about two restaurants down." And oh, okay, good. She went right over and found him in there. Time. How much time does the tour leader spend on their own photography versus assisting participants? This is one of my big bugaboos. I've been on tours where the tour leaders are most interested in getting their own photos, and they'll reluctantly help you out in there, and that just drives me crazy in there. And I call them on it. Aren't you going to spend some time with us? I mean, I'll say something. I can use some help. I'll try to be polite about it, but it'll generally be in the form of, I could use a little help over here, with composition or something, just to get them to stop it using their own phone. How well trained are they to assist with your camera specific issues? I'm kind of off in a place of my own with the OM system, Olympus. No, not many people use those, but they ought to know Canon and Nikon and Sony. They ought to know those pretty well. Conduct expectations. In terms of use of alcohol, smartphone, their professionalism. I've had tour leaders. One tour company I know, their tour leaders are not allowed alcohol, period, the entire time they're on the tour. It's just, we're not doing with it. I was on another tour where the tour leader's wife got so drunk we had to pull over to the side of the road while she barfed up her dinner in there. She was that drunk in there. I've had tour leaders that spend all their time on their smartphone. I didn't enjoy that much at all in there. And all those I think are marks of non-professional. So a couple more fun photos. Canada. I told you I was trying to go to Canada in there. This is some of you might recognize Peggy's Cove there on the left. And I was on Prince Edward Island, and this guy at the restaurant just walked out to the back porch to pick up a fish, start cutting up a fish. I'm like, oh man, I got to get a photo of that. And look at those forearms on that guy in there. This is also Canada. This is the Yukon. This is beautiful. I mean, this is from the helicopter, so I was real pleased with that one. Up in Canada, this is kind of one of my minimalist photos, which I just love the yellow, the blue, and the red, making it very simple in it. Photo etiquette. You've got some things to do and not do. Don't get in the way of somebody else's shot. It'll happen accidentally, but try to watch yourself for it. Try not to get in the way of somebody else's shot. Take turns. A lot of times you got six of you trying to take a picture of the same thing, so you got to learn to take turns, which means you need to be patient. And if other people are waiting, work quickly, and then don't hold up the tour in there. And yes, other photographers that are not on your tour are morons, and they will demonstrate it for you. If you don't even have to ask, they'll let you know in there because they don't have the same photo etiquette because they didn't learn. Transportation can be fun. This is the boat on the left is the boat that we used in the Pantanal. That's me on the back of a motor scooter in Vietnam. It's the only way to get to some of these terraces. That was kind of exciting. This was a tour I led in Guatemala, where to get around Lake Atitlan, the only way around is to get around on the boats, the launches in there. We've done tours where this is again Guatemala on the left, where the main mode of transportation is pickup trucks, snow coach in Yellowstone, camels in Morocco. So, the transportation can be very interesting. I'm getting near the end. Don't worry, I'm getting close to the end. Um, Look for humor in design. One of my big mantras is it's better to be lucky than to be good in there. And so I just love the photo of the two dogs, the mirror images of the doors and the dogs. I just love that. And then the fellow on the right I was in Guatemala, in a little town in Guatemala. He came walking up, and I don't know a whole lot of Spanish, but I could point at him and go, Blanco y verde. And then I pointed at the wall and said, Verde y blanco. I said, un photo, por favor? And he said, yeah, sure. So I just love getting the green and the white. That's just such a fun thing to be able to do in there. Try to find some human moments. I was walking by a barber shop, and this kid was getting his first haircut. Did not look very happy about it. And you can see the guys were having a good time with it. Down there at the bottom photos in Antigua, I was taking a photo of the two ladies on the market, and their two sons came over and decided to photobomb me. And I just thought that was fun, a lot of fun to do that. Again, serendipity. Here's a guy in native dress in Guatemala sitting on the steps eating an ice cream cone. Here's a fella and his wife, older couple, obviously sharing a secret or something. I thought the photo on the right was in Venice, and I thought it was just a wonderful photo. A young couple. I like to imagine them being in love, and sharing a glass of wine together. But who knows? In there again, it's better to be lucky than to be good. I was at bear camp in Alaska, and I'll be damned, that bear went up and saluted the flag, and I was like, how good is that? How cool is that? And then on the right is Iguazu Falls in Brazil, and it's hard to see. But this is a moonbow. This is not a rainbow. And you can see the stars up in here. And we just happened to hit the night of the full moon. They had a tour going out to go see the falls at night. The tour leader left me alone to go fiddle around with my tripod to get this photos because it took me a while to get it all right. But I just so proud of that because it's just something you don't see in there. All right, a few more photos and then we're just about done. Just some pictures that I've gotten over the years of this is fauna. This was up in Newfoundland. This was one of my favorites of the iguanas, lava lizards. I'm sorry, the lava lizards in the Galapagos Islands, kind of buddies. Puffins, you gotta have puffins. I've been on a couple of trips and taking pictures of puffins. It's so much fun in there. Grateful whenever I can get a picture of a bald eagle in the air. In there, here's one of the bears when I was up at bear camp in Alaska. In there, and I have a pretty long lens. If you were wondering how close was I to this bear, this is probably my favorite photo from Antarctica. I just happened to be in the right place at the right time in a small boat, and when that guy started going down, and I click, 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 and I just loved that I got the drips. The fun thing about this one was that there's a website called happywhale.com. And if you can submit your photo to it, and they want you to do that because they want to track where the whales are. But if it's a new whale, for $500 you can name it. And so we got to name that whale because it was a new sighting. And this was in 2017, 2018, and this last week I got an email about he'd been seen again, he or she in there. And we're right down back to the end. May the rainbow of photography follow you in your dreams. Now, this was our tour in Vietnam. And then the end. Any questions? I'm done.
Okay, take your breath.
Yeah, that's my butt too. Just everybody's curious. That's my butt.
All right, let me ask you to take your screen down. Um, I don't see any questions in there because I think it's because you answered all of them for us. Oh my goodness. Okay, so there's a question. Shirley wants to know, what did you name that whale?
Nico was the name of the whale. which is a Japanese name, I think. I forget what it's for, but there was a Nico Bay nearby where we saw it, so we named it Nico.
What's your
Warren,
cat's name?
It's Japanese for cat.
Cat. It's Japanese for cat. That's what it was. Thank you, Lynn.
Um, all right, thank you, Lan. Let's see here. Let me just say, this was so comprehensive, Warren. So detailed. I mean, it was just a it for anybody that's watching this, maybe on YouTube, that's not here in the room, that is trying to figure out, I want to go on a tour. Where do I start? I think this really gives them a head start. There were things in here that I'm like, I hadn't thought of that. And one of the things that I really was making a mental note for myself was I liked that you started a spreadsheet with, hey, these were all the places that I want to go, or this is the tour. And then you went through a list of offerings by different companies or leaders. Now, that's not the way I look at a tour. I look at who I want to go with. So I never really considered going the other direction. And that was just really kind of a helpful tip for me. So thank you for that. Um, do you do you always start with that kind of
No, not at all.
concept?
Not at
Or do
all.
you do you get
A lot of our tour selection is fairly serendipity. We
Mhm.
don't know where that like in next January we're going to Oman, and
Oh,
it came up and we had a chance to sign up for it early, and it was kind of like, oh, that sounds like a cool place. And what got us was the description of it. They said it's like Morocco without the tourists, and that just sold me on it. And then Lynn said, well,
yeah.
can I go over and do a lot of walking and stuff? And we looked at it. Said, yeah, you can. So she said, I'm in too. So in there.
Yeah,
So
I almost want to take the title and say, do you want to go on a tour? Because it doesn't have to be about photography. This covered a lot of those questions that if you're just going on a regular, vacation tour, or this covered a lot of those little tips from packing to tipping to food to all these questions. And in particular, I have friends that lead workshops. And so this is just one of those. Valerie's in here. I'm going to go. I hope you have your list because this was really, really interesting for me because this is something that I'm very interested in. Can't do it right this minute, but I know I will be at some point. So one of the things that go ahead.
I was going to say there's value for this, the tour leaders, because then they could understand what the client expectations or needs or desires are a little better, hopefully.
Yeah. One of the things I did not um, say in my intro about you is I've met Warren through a local photography club. That's how I kind of ran into him, and our paths have crossed when I used to, kind of crash their meetings. But I know him more through our Facebook friendship, and it's like, where's Warren now? He's always in a different. You're on tours all the time,
And
and
we
it's
do a
just
lot, yeah.
yeah, it's kind of fun to see that, hey, you're going to places that, yes, I've either gone to or, oh my God, that's still on my list. So it's been kind of fun to kind of tag
Good.
along, even though I didn't have to pack a bag or drag all those, all the toys with me. But one day I'm going to be able to come back and watch this, and it'll be applying to something I'm about to do. So thank you for taking the time for sharing this with us.
Oh, we
Um,
put together, and it just, I like to say, if I haven't done it wrong, I've seen somebody else do it wrong, and like maybe I can have some other people avoid some of the same mistakes and look what to look out for.
well, I mean, you've gone on a lot of these trips. Do you feel like you've got it down packed? Do you have like, you're not making many mistakes now, or
Oh
do you still
no,
get yourself
I mean, I got back home from those workshop, and I haven't had much time to look at the photos because I had 3 days of driving. But it was kind of like,
there?
oh, I kind of wish I'd done this or I'd gotten that, and maybe I should have, maybe I should have spent some more time taking pictures of the beautiful Sonoran desert landscape. I didn't do that, or maybe I should have focused on some more detail shots. So, you still come back and you go, oh, all right, and particularly when you see somebody else's photos. I don't know if you're
Yeah,
there, Sylvia, but
is
Lisa
she?
posted a wonderful photo of the horses. that we saw coming at us, and I was looking at that, and she posted on Facebook, and I'm like, oh, did I get that photo? I don't know if I got that one. I got to go look because it was a really good one in there. So no, but most of the technical mistakes, probably the biggest thing is overpacking. I mean, it's just you're gonna say, oh, I really should bring this lens, and then you find out you didn't really need it and never used it. Didn't come by. But the two camera thing is vitally important. Always have two cameras because if
I,
one screws up, you know.
yeah. I've traveled with a group of people. Like, there are 6 or 7 of us. We come from all over the country. Everybody's using kind of a different camera. There's half Nikon, half Canon in there, and there's a handful of Sony people. And I've done 3 trips with these people, and each trip, someone's lost a camera. It's just almost like, and thankfully somebody else has a camera, or thankfully Amazon can deliver a camera next day. But it is, it's one of those, why didn't we bring, so it's a lesson that they've had to learn. But that second camera, even if it's not your best camera, because you replaced it with a brand spanking new one and you haven't used it in a while, bring it anyway, just as a backup. But now, we having your phone, you're not going to be without a camera. Very few people
Phones
don't
are
carry
doing an
a phone.
awful lot for you. When I
Yeah.
was on this
So,
photo workshop this past weekend, the leader kept saying, "Don't forget, you got a $2,000 camera in your
phone.
pocket."
That's right.
So
Right.
don't forget it.
Right. That's
Yeah, I
right.
agree.
All right. There was one question in there. I think it was for me. Yes, the recording will be up on Friday night. I always post on Friday nights at 6 p.m. Central Time. So, barring any weird thing on the recording or my personal work schedule, it's always at 6 p.m. on Friday, the Friday after the sessions. So, all right, Warren, I want to thank you for coming and sharing everything you know about going on a tour, because I think you did a brain drain, right?
I've
I don't think you left anything out. I'd be,
taken notes for a year
yeah,
since we
yeah.
talked about it in March, last March.
I
Um,
know, I know. When we were talking about this, it's like March seems so, I mean, that was so long ago, but that's I'm very lucky. I get a lot of yeses on this program. So, it's real. It's I just booked someone yesterday for December, and they said like December in 10 months, and I said yeah. So I'm just lucky that way. So, and I'm not complaining, so I'll take it. But I'm glad that you weren't, like emailing and saying, "Hey, I've got an opportunity to go somewhere." I would have said, "Go, run, don't walk," and we would have found another date. But I'm glad this worked out. So,
yeah,
thank you, Warren. Thank you, thank you, thank you. All right,
you're welcome.
next week, Ruth Hoyt will be here to share her presentation, "When There's No Action, Knowing When to Photograph." All right, y'all have a nice night, and we'll see you next week.